After 5.5 months of traveling, the time came for me to return home to Canada. I started my long journey on September 7th. After almost a full day of teaching, I hauled my luggage for the last time to the bus stop and caught the bus to Regensburg train station. There I took a train to Freising, which was a pretty pleasant ride, and I grabbed a seat with enough space to keep my luggage next to me. The train was a few minutes late, so I was stressing a bit about missing my tight connection. Not being familiar with the Munich transport system, I thought my connections were other trains, but they turned out to be airport buses, which ran every few minutes. So it was simple for me just to take the next bus to Munich Airport. The bus driver seemed intent on killing us and sent both us and our luggage flying around the bus as we hurtled towards the airport. I couldn't record the chaos and lunge after my luggage, so this video looks pretty calm. Suffice it to say that I was very happy when I got off the bus from hell. When I got to Terminal 1, I couldn't check my bags through until 2 hours before the flight. When does the EasyJet to London flight open?
1955.
It opens at 19:50,
Yes.
7:55.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So I wandered to Terminal 2 with everything in tow, where there were far more places to eat. I was flying out of Terminal 1. I, of course, got myself a Starbucks Java chip frappuccino and a water and sat there for a while. Normally I wouldn't drink coffee past 7 p.m., but I knew that I had to stay awake for at least 24 hours. Little did I know at this point that I would end up being awake for more than 48 hours, with a brief 3-hour reprieve on my flight from London to Toronto. Finally, I was able to check my bags through to London Gatwick Airport at the EasyJet counter. I had checked in online when I had booked my ticket, so all I needed was my boarding pass and my passport. As the UK doesn't require vaccination records, I didn't need to show any other documentation. After my bags were off on their journey via the conveyor belt, I made my way through security to passport control. As I had entered Germany by train, there was no timestamp in my passport. So I was asked when I had entered Germany, where I had been staying, and the purpose of my trip. My passport had been stamped when I had entered the Schengen area in Amsterdam 2 months prior, so I was within the 90-day time limit and was good to go. I headed off to the gate to wait for my flight. The flight was delayed by an hour and also had a gate change during that time, but I took everything in stride and watched some videos I had loaded on my phone. I always over-prepare my tech when I travel. Sometimes I don't listen to or watch everything that I've loaded, but it's always good to be prepared as my journeys are usually quite long. I also travel with a portable power bank that I charge at every opportunity. No masks were required in Munich Airport or on the EasyJet flight to London. We also had a 45-minute wait on the tarmac for clearance from the tower. And then we took off. It was an uneventful flight, and soon we were touching down at Gatwick, and my mammoth layover was underway. I arrived in the wee small hours of the morning and breezed through passport control, as I hold a British passport due to my father being born and raised in England. Although I was only staying in the airport, I had booked my 2 sets of flights at different times, so I had to enter the country, collect my bags, and recheck onto my next international flight. Everything was closed and people were trying to sleep anywhere, even baggage repacking tables. I found a spot on the floor and set myself up, snacking on my rations, which were running low at this point. Okay, so this layover is going to be a lot different to the one that I spent in Istanbul. Istanbul, I was able to just stay in the transfer lounge, which is probably a lot nicer than the departures hall at London Gatwick Airport. I'm sitting on a hard floor. Everything is closed. It's 30 minutes past midnight London time. The flight was an hour delayed due to storms here in London. I'm going to sit here for a while and rest. Thank God I've got some nuts and a protein bar and some water in my backpack, so I'm able to eat something, but I'm guessing until about 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, nothing's going to be open. My flight is at 11. So I think I can only check in about 8, hopefully a little earlier. Can't get coffee. It's going to be a long evening, but it's just a moment in time. So we'll see how the rest of the night goes. The thing about Gatwick Airport is that there is almost no carpeted area anywhere. Definitely not in the departure terminal. And as I later found out, not in the transit terminal either. At some point, I started shivering uncontrollably as I was lying on a cold, tiled floor, my head on my aeroplane pillow resting on my backpack, and I knew I had to get up and move. It's 3 a.m. and there is finally some life in an airport that has been dead for hours. Oh Lord, this actually means that I might be able to get some coffee. After the first coffee place couldn't process my Canadian debit card, I had luck with the second and bought a coffee and a muffin, hauling my treasures like a character from Lord of the Rings to a spot near the WestJet kiosks. Neither were particularly good, but the caffeine and sugar were very much needed as I still had 7 hours until I could board my flight and get some sleep. I refuse to fall asleep in airports when I travel alone. Recently, a young friend of mine had her bag stolen while she fell asleep at an airport in Spain, including her cell phone and money. As my life pretty much travels with me, it's not a chance I'm willing to take for a few hours of rest. After another 4 hours of sitting, walking, using the bathroom, sitting, walking, the WestJet kiosks opened up, and I was able to send my bags off for the last time. The next time I saw them, I would be grabbing them off the baggage carousel in London, Ontario, and I would be home. After more than 5 months of hauling them on and off trains, planes, and buses, it was a huge relief. I had finally made it through to the transit terminal and was but a few hours from being able to sleep. After more trial and another refusal from the British banking system to accept my debit card, I gave up and headed to my gate to wait for my flight. There was yet another hour flight delay before I was able to reach my nirvana, a comfortable seat on the plane and a place to rest my weary body. We had a 30 to 45 minute wait on the tarmac again. I don't remember how long, as time had become a novelty item by this point. I just knew that I would miss my connecting flight to Toronto due to the delays. We had to wear masks on the flight from Canada to Toronto and in the Toronto airport. Finally, up, and away we went, and I was headed home. My great European adventure coming to a close as I left the continent, smiling at the thought of my apartment, my bed, and the country that makes me so happy. The cloud cover was incredible and unlike anything I had ever seen on my previous travels. I only managed to get about 3 hours of sleep on the 7-hour flight, but the meal was the best airline meal I've ever had. Well done, WestJet. The first sight of Canada allowed every bit of stress and fatigue to drain from my weary body. For those of us who had missed our connecting flights, there was a person handing out our new boarding passes for the flights we had been rescheduled on as soon as we exited the jetway, as well as a $15 meal voucher for the inconvenience.
Last one, Vanessa?
Brown, yes, that would be me.
Thank you.
Instead of my 3 p.m. flight, I was now scheduled on a 9 p.m. flight, so I had an additional hours to wait in Toronto. I didn't care. I was home. Completing the voluntary forms on ArriveCAN helped me to clear the kiosks very quickly after it printed out my entry ticket that border officers would check as I cleared passport control. The line that wound through all the entry kiosks was extremely long, as many flights had landed at a similar time. I heard people around me complaining, but I think that Toronto Pearson has a very good and efficient system for incoming international flights, and it deals with the long line of travelers well. The printed ticket, and sometimes your passport, is all you need to get past the border control officers, unless they think there is a need to ask more questions. There are no passport stamps, as everything is electronic, based on what you input into the kiosks. Finally, one of the officers opened a section of the taped-off queue and ushered me and a group of people straight through and out into the arrivals area. I didn't need to speak to any border officers, and I smiled broadly as I headed to the transit area. Toronto Pearson Airport now allows some luggage to be booked through to a final domestic destination, which means that travelers changing from international to domestic flights are not required to collect their luggage when they arrive in Canada before dropping it off at a connection belt. This may not be the case for all flights, but for the last 2 years, it has been relevant to mine and saves me a lot of time when making a connection. I took my meal voucher and found a place to spend it, buying a yogurt and soda for the entire $15. I think that retailers raise the prices when you're using a meal voucher, but I didn't care. The yogurt felt good going down, and I was just happy to be home. After a little walk around, I sat down in one of the tech areas and watched shows for a couple of hours. I recharged my tech and then packed up and decided to go straight to the gate, as I was done with airports by this point. The walk to my gate was long, as it was at the far end of the airport, that last section where the short flights leave to the quiet destinations. On the way, I stopped at my beloved Tim Hortons and bought even more sugar. My body would need a full detox after this trip. And here we go. Last flight, last journey, last gasp to get home. This was the only flight, train, or bus that had been on time in my entire 37-hour journey. It seems that every airport in every country is experiencing staff shortages and delays due to the pandemic. That 20-minute flight to London, Ontario was both long and short. It was a short flight, but it felt like an eternity as my long journey came to an end. It wasn't just the 37 hours of traveling or the 48 hours of being awake. It was the culmination of a previous 5 months of almost constant movement between cities and countries. It was the hauling of my luggage on and off trains, planes, and buses at almost 50 years of age. Whilst I don't regret a single moment and I had the most amazing time, I was tired. Not just tired, but weary down to my soul. That welcome to London sign greeted me like a long-lost friend, and everything released from my body as the grin hit my lips. Grabbing my luggage for the last time, I headed out of the small airport and into the crisp London night, and waited for my wonderful Turkish friends to pull up to the curb. They had come out at 10 p.m. just to pick me up, and I couldn't wait to throw my arms around my darling friends, knowing that I was finally home.
Oh my God, how are you?
I hope you all enjoyed my long trip home and got any information you may need for future or current travel. There are just a couple of additional things that I wanted to mention or clear up. Firstly, why I booked 2 separate sets of flights and had to wait in Gatwick for 12 hours. When I was in the Netherlands, I knew that time was moving quickly towards my return to Canada, and I knew that the longer I waited to book my flight, the more costly it could become. At the time, I was considering staying in the Netherlands for another month, and I was also planning on spending my last week in the UK visiting friends and family. But that never happened due to the exorbitant costs in the UK at the moment. To that end, I searched for flights to Toronto from Amsterdam, London, and Barcelona because I was also considering spending my last month in Spain. The flight from London Gatwick was the cheapest, and it took me all the way to London, Ontario, for a pretty good price. I never imagined that I would end up in Germany at the time, so I figured that I would take the train and ferry system to Gatwick from Amsterdam or Barcelona, wherever I ended up. Once I ended up in Regensburg, I had to book an additional flight to get me from Germany to London Gatwick to make my connection. I did have a look at the journey via train, but it was just too long. It was also a good thing that I booked my flight from London, England, because flying from Munich to Toronto was double the price that I had paid to get all the way to London, Ontario. The second thing that I would like to mention are the apps that I use to book all of this. I've mentioned before that I only have a Canadian debit card, not a credit card, and some websites don't accept this, Deutsche Bahn being one of them. So I used omio.com to get my tickets to Munich Airport. To book flights, I usually go with Expedia.com. I have used Kayak.com before, but I prefer Expedia. So, how much did I pay for my entire trip home? My ticket from Regensburg to Munich was 40 Canadian dollars or 30 US dollars. My flight from Munich Airport to London Gatwick, including the luggage that I had to pay an additional amount for, was 168 Canadian dollars or 124 US dollars. I had one large and one small checked bag plus a cabin bag that was small enough to be included in the price of the ticket. This flight was with EasyJet. My flight from London Gatwick to Toronto and then connecting on to London, Ontario, including the luggage that I also had to pay additional for, was 570 Canadian dollars or 419 US dollars. This flight was with WestJet, a budget Canadian airline that I usually use when I travel to and from Central America. I like them a lot and will continue to use them in the future. So the total for my trip home was 778 Canadian dollars or 573 US dollars. Not cheap for a one-way trip, but not terribly expensive either. I hope you enjoyed this extra information and thank you for watching.